So I hope is it visible to all? Anyone can say yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. So the name of the subject goes as front-end design tools in web technology. So many of you are already familiar with some of the topics which we are going to cover in this because some of you already gone through the internship. So it should be easy, enjoyable, and should have a good learning experience with the subject as such. So initially, the what the prerequisite of the subject is that a person must have a good knowledge or a basic knowledge of the client server architecture as such, because that's the basic fundamental for learning this web technologies. So we start with the two-tier client server architecture, where on the left-hand side we'll have a client, and on the right-hand side are the server, and both of them are physical, tangible assets, means they're actually existing. A client is a machine which is actually existing, a hardware, same way the server, a machine, a hardware which is actually existing. And both of them communicate over the web, what we call the internet or the world wide web. So on the left hand side, the client can be a desktop machine or a laptop machine or a smartphone. And to communicate to a server, the client should have a browser in it. Browser is a basic prerequisite which I think all of you are already using for so many years. Whenever I want to search anything on the web, I want to look out for anything on the web, the search engine is required, the browser is required so that I can initiate my activity and I can look out for the resources which I want to surf on the web. So that's a basic prerequisite to tier client server architecture, which is almost a fundamental diagram for all the web technologies. That this has to be there, client on the left and the server on the right. Now, over a period, what happened? Many of the technologies started evolving over a period of time, and the effort was made by the web administrators and even by W3C, World Wide Web Consortium. That's a whole organization that manages the growth of the web technologies. That many technologies came over a period of time, so they started placing them at a proper position. So most of the technologies were based on the languages, like on the client side, either on the server side. So we'll have the JavaScript, the HTML as a language all on the left hand side, the client side. And then we'll have the server side languages like Servlet, the JSP, EJB, Hibernate, Struts, Spring, Velocity, everything onto the right hand side. Now the base for all these is the Java programming language. So when we use the programming language, the base fundamental base remains the Java. And they are all the offshoots of it, which have all emerged over a period of time by different companies and the web developers, both some working as a freelancer, some working in proprietary companies. And from the Java is like a tree, and these are the different branches who have actually come out of it. So one is a servlet, one is a JSP, one is a EJB, one is a Hibernate, one is a Struts, one is a Spring, another is a Velocity, another is a JavaScript, now HTML language. Now these they need to be positioned somewhere. So the entire web technology got shifted or partitioned into two parts: the client side and the server side. So HTML, JavaScript, and the JSP, they slowly and steadily they evolved as the client side languages as such. And servlets, Hibernate, Springs, etc. They came to be evolved as the server side languages which are used to perform the task of verification and validation onto the web server side as such. So slowly and steadily it happened over 30 years because Java came way back in 92 by James Gosling. But after that, in the last 28 years, a lot thing has happened in Java. So many technologies keep on coming, they get added to it, and they get keep on positioning themselves. So fundamental architecture was two-tier client server architecture. Then came the n-tier client server architecture, where we'll have additional layer called as a middleware or the middle layer, which we'll see the slide for that also. And nowadays we also use the MVC, the model view controller architecture as such. And further on, the IoT came and they started using publisher subscriber model. So all these are the different architectural framework which have evolved, and every time the company has to decide that when they're rolling out their technology, they have to decide that on which layer it is going to work as such. So when we use Servlet, JSP, EJB, Hibernate, Struts, we do not use the word programming language for them. We use the word as scripting language, the server side scripting language, or the server side technologies. So fundamental base programming language is the Java. Technologies are something which will evolve over a period of time. They keep on changing. Same with scripting languages also evolve over a period of time. But the programming language is something that remains as a fundamental rock solid. They don't change the concept with the passage of time. They are fixed. Their concepts are rock solid. They don't change. Once they have decided, they will remain as it is as such. Now, if the communication has to be performed between the client and the server, how it will take place in web technologies, we'll have something called request response paradigms. So we'll have the client on the left hand side against server on the right hand side, and they will communicate with a set of the request and response messages. So client will generate a request and forward it to the server. Then server will process that request, and server will see what the client is actually looking for from the server. So server will generate a response and send it back to the client machine. So that is what we say request response paradigm. And every time the request will always come from the client side. Server will never send a request to the client because never a situation will arrive that server will generate a request for the client. Server will always send a response and the client will always send a request as well. So there are two of them are logically connected over the World Wide Web through the internet mechanism, and request response keep on happening. Now who will control the show here? It's all the server. If the server is heavily overloaded, if the performance of the server is deteriorating, or if the client is bombarding the server with bogus requests, the server has a full right to terminate the request. So server is the controlling authority, server is the deciding authority, and server will manage the show here as such. So over we'll see gradually as we move into the subject. When the client requests or when the client logs into the server for the very first time, a session is established by the server to manage a client. So a single server can manage one client, 10 client, 100, 1 lakh, 2 lakh, any number of it. That depends upon the performance and capability of the server. What is a load utilization for the server as such. So for every client, the server will create a separate session. So a one unique session will be managed and maintained by the server for the incoming client request. So server will keep a track of the client with the help of session IDs. So for every single session, which is the logical in nature, the server will create for managing the client request as such. And all the communication over the web will take place with the help of a protocol, what we say the HTTP protocol, which I think many of you are already familiar with, the hypertext transfer protocol. That's a fundamental underlying protocol with the help of which the communication happens between a client and a server as such. A server, since it is a web-based server, so we also call it as a web server. A server handling the request over the World Wide Web and communication all being done through the HTTP protocol, so it's the HTTP server or the web server. Now, the client will always send a request to a server. So we also use the words that server listens to the client request. So when we do the programming, we use the word listens. The server is continuously running on 24 by 7 basis, and server is listening to the client request. So when I'm listening to somebody, I need to have some mechanism where I receive the request. So server will open up port number, what we call the port number is 80. Now that is a dedicated port for receiving the HTTP specific client request. Now since all of us have already done the networks part, and you might have another subject here in 7th semester again for the ACN. If you look at the OSI model, that's a basic fundamental model for the entire network worldwide. The different layers are application layer, presentation, session, transport, network, data link layer, and the physical layer. So 7 layers are arranged from top to bottom. Now, if you look at the addresses that are being shared here or that are being used here, and if we start from the bottom, at the data link layer, the DLL, we use a MAC addresses, right? The physical addresses. Then we move up the layer, we use the IP addresses on the network layer. That's called the Internet Protocol addresses. Then you further move the up layer, we'll have a transport layer. It will use the port number or the port address. Point I'm trying to say is when we use the web technology, we use three kind of the addresses that actually comes to that we must have a good knowledge of. First is the MAC addresses. Now the length of the MAC address is 48-bit wide. So 48-bit wide MAC addresses work onto the physical layer of the OSI model. And this is actually the permanent address of my system, maybe the desktop or a laptop, because this is something which is embossed or embedded on the NIC card of my system, the network interface card. So this is a real address, not logical, no virtual addresses. This is actually existing for my system. So if my system wants to become a part of the network, it wants to attach or connect it to a network, it must have a NIC card in it. So if you look at your traditional desktop machines, if you have ever seen the motherboards, they have got PCI slot, peripheral component interconnect slot. So these PCI slot used to have the NIC card integrated with them. And nowadays also laptop, every device that is going to be a part of the web must have an NIC card attached to it. And this NIC card will have a unique 48-bit number, and that number will be unique worldwide. No other machine can have the NIC card having the same number as your machine. And at this, when I say this, I am not talking of cloning. The Chinese companies or the Taiwanese companies or Mongolian or Korean company which are into the cloning mechanism. But the if you talk of the pure integrity wise, then these 48-bit number is unique worldwide. No other machine can have it. So as we move further, we'll have a IP address. So MAC address works at the data link layer. At the network layer, we'll have the IP addresses, which we are all familiar now that we have got two set of the IP addresses, 32-bit IP address when we talk of the IPv4 addressing mechanism, and then we have got 128-bit address when we talk of the IPv6 addressing mechanism. So these are the logical address. So if I've got a laptop or a desktop, or let's take an example of laptop. If I've got a laptop here, I take my laptop to my IP university, so it will have a MAC address. So when I take it to the lab of the second floor, third floor, ETL 312 or 313, and I connect it to the network, so I will get a dynamic IP address there as such. IP address will be provided to my machine, but my MAC address remains same. It will not change. Let's say next day I carry my laptop to JNU and I connect it to the network at the Jawaharlal Nehru University. Again, my MAC address remains same, only IP address changes. Next day I carry it to the Triple IT Delhi. Again, my MAC address remains same, but I get the IP address of the Triple IT Delhi. The point I'm trying to say is again, it's the IP address that keeps on clocking, that keeps on changing, and that indicates to which network you are connected. So we all know IPv4 addresses have got five classes, class A, B, C, D, E, and they have got the range from 0 to 127, then 128 to 191, then 192 to 223, then 224 to 239, and then 240 to 255. Now this classification of classes happens only in the IPv4 addressing scheme. We don't do it in the IPv6 addressing scheme, so that is a classless addressing. So we don't believe in the concept of the classes in the IPv6 address scheme. In the web technologies, almost all the server-side scripting languages like Servlets or Hibernate or Strut, Spring, everyone is very concerned about the IP addresses. From which machine you are generating a request. So when we generate the request and go to the server, our information about the IP address, the MAC address, and the port number flows over the web. And most of the time, it's the information is in encrypted format. We can't, as a human being, we will not be able to see it or visually understand what the information. But yes, we'll discuss the examples of it. What all information is carried in the HTTP request header as such. Then above the IP address, we'll have the port numbers. A port number is a logical entity, just like the IP address is a logical entity. So MAC address was 48-bit wide, IP address is 32-bit wide, and again reducing the 16 bits, the port addresses or port numbers are 16-bit numbers. So we see maximum port number which are possible worldwide is 2 raised to power 16. That means 0 to 65535. That's the maximum number of the port number that are possible as such. So in the networks, we have a very good statement when we say uh, machine to machine communication. So when we use the word machine to machine communication, that means we're talking of the MAC address to MAC address. And when both the machines are a part of the same network. For example, if I want to carry out a communication between the two machines in my ETL 312 lab or 313 lab, I don't require IP address because both my machines are part of the same network. They can talk to each other using the MAC address because they've got the NIC cards. NIC card a 48-bit address and they can easily do it. But yes, if I want to carry out a communication between the machines from, let's say, from GGS IPU to JNU, then yes, I require the combination of MAC address plus the IP address because now the machines are not a part of the same network. They are a part of the different network. But when we use the word uh, end-to-end communication, we use another word process-to-process communication. Let's say a browser running on a machine in an IP university talks to a process, or which could be a browser, on a machine running in JNU. Then we require the port number because port number will facilitate the process to process communication as such. So these are the process running on two different machines which are a part of two different networks. So in the web technologies, when we generate a client request from the which flows from the browser of the client to the web server listens it on the port number 80. So we have got initial port number 0 to 1023. They are reserved. They can't be used by us. Every port number has a specific purpose. It is dedicated to a specific protocol. So port number 80 will always be used by the web server for handling the HTTP specific request as such. So as we are already familiar with the word, it's a hypertext transfer protocol. Spelling of transfer is wrong, which is bad. TRANSFER. So HTTP function as a request response protocol in the client server computing model. So it works at a base protocol in two-tier client server architecture, in three-tier client server architecture, in middleware computing, in MVC architecture, in public subscriber model. Everywhere it is act as a default de facto protocol for the web. And the credit goes to the Tim Berners-Lee because he was the first person who actually came up with this idea of carrying out a communication over the web. So there's a European research nuclear agency called CERN. He was the first person who postulated it in the original beta version. Where does it operate? On the application layer of the OSI model, and it always listens to the port number 80. But what if my request carries some encrypted data? It carries some secure data. For example, I'm carrying a credit card transaction on my machine. So it is carrying my credit card number, which is 16 digits. It carries the CVV number, the credit card verification value number, which is 3-digit long. And then it carries the 6 digit for year, 2 digits for month, and 4 digits for year. So which is 16 plus 3 makes it 19 plus 6 makes it 25. So I am transmitting 25 digits of my card over the HTTP request from the client to the server. Now, for facilitating such a kind of encrypted request, um, in the web we have got something a secure socket layer, what we call SSL. It was introduced by the Netscape company, and the server always receives such kind of requests which are of commercial worth involving financial transaction using a secure socket layer, and the server listens on the port number 443, and the protocol used is the HTTPS, Hypertext Transfer Protocol. S stands for secure because entire information that is flowing or moving from the client to the server is over the secure socket layer. That's again an artificial or logical layer that gets established between the client and a server. So client has to demand this layer. So it's a paid layer. Server will never provide anything free of cost. Only the HTTP protocol is free of cost protocol. So somewhere somebody has to bear the cost. That is why when we make a financial transaction on the web, so either me as a customer will bear a cost, or the merchant establishment will bear a cost, or the bank will bear a cost. Somewhere somebody has to bear a cost. Maybe it can be hardly 0.08% of the total transaction fee. That's fine. But then somebody has to bear the cost of providing a security. And security never comes for free. Because if it comes for free, it will not have a worth, it will not have a value. Somewhere somebody has to request for secure mechanism, and then whosoever requests, he should be the primary person to bear a cost for the request. And otherwise, if you see, if nobody bears the cost, then there will be so many number of attacks and on the web as such. So to prevent my leakage of the credit card or debit card information from the web on the web, I need to protect my information on the web. And this is where secure socket layer really comes handy. And as we discussed in the last class also, we have got a subject called cryptography that provides various encryption technique, decryption technique, symmetric and asymmetric algorithms that help me to provide the protection to this my financial data before it moves on the web. Otherwise, my credit or debit card information is likely to be hacked by millions of hackers who are just probing the web. We'll have two port numbers. Port number 80, the free, the HTTP protocol, and the port number 443, which is for the secure protocol, HTTPS. And these are both the port numbers which are used by the web server to listen to the client request. Now, in such a scenario, we always believe that the server is continuously running 24 by 7 by 365. Now, those of you who have might have done server-side programming somewhere in some course, some of we always write small code while parenthesis true and the code in the curly braces. That's how we normally write the code for server. That means server is always running. It will keep on receiving the request as such. So there are various versions of the HTTP protocol which have evolved over a period of time, starting from point 0.9 to 1 to 1.1, then 2, and then currently we are using the version number 3 of the HTTP protocol. That is how slowly, steadily it is evolving over a period of time. Now this is how the client server computing has evolved and come into the n-tier client server computing. Now the diagram which we have seen earlier, and if we look at this diagram, we'll have a layer, additional layer called as a middleware or the logical layer. A layer connecting between the client and the request. I hope it is visible. Anyone can say yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Fine. So in the middleware, we'll have now this middleware is a logical layer. Now that means my client is a physical entity, the server is a physical entity, but between the two, I have got an additional layer, a logical layer called as a middleware or the middle layer as such. Now that is a shift or a migration from two-tier client server computing to n-tier client server computing, where many of the technologies like servlets, the JSPs, the beans, instead of hosting them onto the web server, we take it from there and put it onto the additional layer called as a middleware or as a middle layer. Now this can be made to host either on the client side or on the server side, web server side, or we can have additional server called as application server as such. So various application server exist like we've got an Apache Tomcat server, we've got a Pramati server, the BEA WebLogic server, IBM servers are there. So many of these servers exist between the client and the server. So nowadays the servers which are application server possess the capabilities of web servers, and the traditional web servers now possess the capability of the application servers also. So nowadays we have got a mixed kind of a hybrid kind of mechanism that exists between the client and the server. So middleware layer was primarily created because so many technologies started came over a period of time that where to position them and how to handle them. So we came with the concept of the middleware or the middle layer. So these are the technologies which can be made to function either on the client or on the server side. Now that was around 2005 to 2006. Around 2008 onwards, we came up with the MVC architecture, the model, view, and the controller architecture. So middleware was a precursor before the MVC came in the full-blown era. So nowadays we don't use the middleware or the middle layer. We use two tier. We use the client server architecture and the MVC architecture, the model view controller architecture, where on each and every layer we'll have a different positioning of the technologies as such. For example, JSP will work onto the view layer. The servlets will work onto the model layer. The Hibernate will work onto the controller layer. We'll discuss MVC architecture later on. Don't worry about it as and when we'll start studying the servlets in JSP. But nowadays we primarily use the model view controller architecture as compared to the traditional architecture. So let's briefly discuss about the Tim Berners-Lee also. He was a person to whom we can give the credit for being the creator of the World Wide Web. He's a professor at MIT US, and we all know the value and the worth of the MIT in the engineering domain. He is today also the director of W3C World Wide Web Consortium, and he is also the winner of the ACM Turing Award, which he received way back in the 2016. Since I'm also heading the ACM branch of the USIT, I will also encourage all of you to. We'll have the elections coming in the month of October end. That is when our annual calendar will end. Those of you are looking forward towards making a good profile of yourself, maybe for going for a higher PG program in the management side, MBA side, or in the MS abroad, should definitely join the IEEE or the ACM chapters, because these are the chapters which are acknowledged worldwide. So wherever you go, everyone knows what is IEEE, what is ACM, and if you become a part of the societies, it will definitely help you to build up your profile, because when you go abroad, campus placement takes place everywhere as such, and there they always look out that what the student has done in the UG and the PG programs, how active he was he. So I will encourage you to join any of the societies as per your choice. Doesn't matter as such, but I will encourage you to join ACM chapter. But IEEE is equally good, and so is a CSI. We don't have active CSI chapter in our department. Maybe we'll open it in a few months from now. So it joins any of them. And the good thing about the ACM is that what point coming back to it, we do not have a Nobel Prize in computer science. If you look at the other branches of science, the physics, chemistry, and biology, they have the Nobel Prizes. Every year they're awarded by the Nobel company in Stockholm in Norway. But we don't have a Nobel Prize in computer science. So for that, ACM started the award way back in the 1965, and now it's 2020. So if you see about 35 plus 20, 55 years have passed by. Now in the 55 years, considering the amount, consider our population size and the number of the engineers our engineering institutes churn out every year, we should have got so many number of awards because we are so good in software field in the entire world. But so disheartening to say that we have got only one award, and that way back in the 1994. It was in the field of the artificial intelligence. I will not tell the name of the person, which I will ask everyone to Google it, because just Googling his name and going through his profile is inspirational, because he is only one recipient from India in the last 55 years who have got this ACM Turing Award. And it's got a huge amount of prize money. Means the price of the Nobel Prize, the value and the worth of the Nobel Prize is same as the ACM Turing Award. And every year it is given to some outstanding research or contribution in the area of the computer science and information technology, given to one person or a group of person, just like we have got a physics award shared by three physicists working in the same lab in a university. Same way here it can be given to one person or a multiple persons together. So for his contribution in the field of web technologies, Tim Berners-Lee got this award in the year 2016. So he 2000, before 2000 he has already done his work. So after 15 years he got the award for his outstanding work. Now let's see this diagram. It's a very important diagram that lays the basic fundamentals for the request response paradigm in 5 steps. So if you look at the first step, the user issues a URL from the browser. So we always type the name of the URL into the address bar of the web browser. So same way here is HTTP host port path file. So the URL is generated and the URL flows over the web, so that we can see second point, browser send a request message to the server. So we'll have certain information about the different components that constitute a request message. So we'll have a get, which is the name of the function. So we've got two functions, the get function, the post function. There are two widely used functions, but there are many other functions also. Then URL is a uniform resource locator. Then HTTP is a protocol version and protocol name. 1.1 is a version. And then we'll have some more information which will discuss what is the component of the HTTP request header. Then it flows to the server. So server maps the URL to the file or a program